Hey, I'm Oli Wood, and I'm really nervous, and when I'm nervous, I swear, so I apologize. I'd like to talk about the wall of learning, which is bunches of paper that look like this. They happened between 2010 and 2014 when I worked in a small startup, and these days I work for a giant enterprise. The thing with startups is you can get quite introverted, and when I screwed up and I wanted to learn from that, I would write it down, and then I would plan to look at it, and I'd plan to not make that same mistake again, and maybe I'd learn from my mistakes. But my big problem was that I wrote stuff in a notebook, and it lived on my desk, and I never actually went back and looked at it, just like all the notes I make at conferences. So I started with sheets of A4 paper and a whiteboard marker, writing them on a piece of paper and BluTacking them to the wall, because then maybe I would actually learn something from it. Like, when you've got two environments, and one works and one doesn't, look at what you've added to the config as well as what you've deleted, because I added some config that blanked out some other config, and broke our second environment, and that took us hours and hours to debug. When you change an interface, you will screw somebody over. It's really obvious when I say it now, but roll back 7 years, that caused me a lot of pain, and today there are lots and lots more interfaces in my world because of Docker and other things. If something is missing, it might not be being created, or it might be being removed. We spent a night looking for something for why device tracking wasn't being created. It turned out that if you scrolled down the page, it was being deleted after it's been created. At the time, we actually blamed Mongo. So these things were stuck to the sheets of paper stuck to the wall, and so everybody can see them. People visiting our offices can see them. We were in a co-working space, so people wandered in and out. Even potential hires could see them. And the nice thing about them was I didn't necessarily learn those lessons, but they were excellent prompts for conversations. People could wander in and go, oh yeah, we also had similar problems with Docker or with Mongo deleting things. And you could passively consume them. They weren't something official. If you just came in to wander in to chat to me when you had a coffee, you could pretty much consume everything I'd learned in that business in 30 seconds by staring at one of our walls. They were really lo-fi, low-tech. They were literally whiteboard marker on sheets of A4, and that makes them very approachable. They're not an official document. They're not laminated. It kind of felt very honest to write stuff on the wall and write stuff on paper and stick it on the wall. It comes with no sense of authority. I am pretty much an expert in almost nothing in my life, but I have learned some stuff along the way, and by writing it down and sticking it on the wall, I hope it kind of encouraged other people to learn some of those lessons if they didn't know them already, or maybe just be a bit more open about stuff. They had a very low barrier to participation. At the end of the day, they're sheets of paper stuck to a wall, so you can get involved with them just by standing in our office and staring at them, or you can interact with them. This is one of my favorites. It's an important lesson, but more importantly, my friend Steve came and corrected my spelling, which is something you could probably spend all week doing on that wall, I'll be honest. If you're working on something in detail, don't explain the detail of the problem to somebody, just explain the consequences and implications of the change. I think I might have made this, I might be overblowing this really. What started as a way as self-improvement maybe became a sort of shift in our culture. We were only 4 people, so I can't really stand by that. But I now work for a giant enterprise. We're distributed all over the world. We're across, I don't know, pretty much all time zones, and we're quite corporate. So I can't stick sheets of handwritten paper to the wall anymore, but I'd still like to kind of achieve some of the effects. When you find yourself trying to just make something work, you probably don't really understand the problem you're trying to solve. I wrote this about a bit of code because I spent 12 hours trying to make it work, and it turned out I didn't really understand what was broken. But maybe it applies to lots of other things other than code. I'd like to kind of achieve some of these things again, but wikis feel really weird. Let's face it, it's where content goes to die. I'm not going to tweet out this stuff. It does fit in a tweet because it fitted on a side of A4, but it's just weird and it's got no context. Nobody's ever going to subscribe to my newsletter. So I do this instead. I try to work in the open. I try to have discussions in group channels on Instant Messenger. I try to use wiki pages for discussions rather than big threaded mail chains. And when we do stuff in production, we try to give heads up in common rooms rather than try to explain what we did. And I did start trying to build something to kind of replicate these sheets of A4, and then I remembered one of them which said, it'll all be okay once we do this great big thing. It's never true. Low-tech solutions start balls rolling faster. I truly believe this. Just if you need to get something done, just start where you're at. And so I've gone back to writing on sheets of A4 and sticking them to the wall behind me, and I hope when I hang out on video conferences, somebody will ask me about some of them one day. Thanks very much.